Good.
Beautiful. Good morning, Tracy. Thank you so much for joining me as part of my pregnancy and infant loss awareness series of interviews. It's so wonderful to have you join me.
Thanks, Belinda. It's lovely to be here. I appreciate the invitation. I think sharing our stories is so important. We can learn so much from it. So thank you.
Definitely. That's right. That's what drives me to have these experiences for women to tap into. I'm just going to formally introduce you, and then I'll hand it over for you to share your story, and then we'll go from there and we'll have a good chat.
Yeah.
So recently, Tracy birthed her new business, Bright Spirit Blessings, such a beautiful name, through which she offers intuitive energy therapies, including Reiki, readings, and intuitive conversations to people who are asking the big questions in their lives. Who am I? Where am I going? Why am I here? And how do I be me? Such good questions. Her new work brings together over 30 years of working with the lens of psychology, her research on women's lives, her lived experience of infertility and pregnancy loss, insights gleaned from raising 3 children over 3 decades with her husband, and her new passion for the power of the alternate holistic therapies to bring hope and joy into everyday living. Tracy's work in the areas of parenting, relationships, infertility, perinatal support, grief and loss, and real life challenges and choices had made her unafraid of reaching for tools, strategies, and understandings that go beyond normal, predictable, standard, mainstream medical models. Very powerful. She has found that by diving deep into intuition and deeper knowing, profound insights and surprising directions emerge. And here is the alchemy. Here is where the magic happens. There is no place she would rather be. Tracy welcomes the opportunity to meet with you there and bring bright spirit blessings into your life as you seek new ways.
Yes. Thank you. That's so beautiful to hear your bio back. It's like, whoa, that's me. Yes, it is. That's my story.
You. So Tracy, please share with us, what is your story of loss that has brought you here today?
Thank you. Well, I'm 55 now, but back when I was in my early 20s, I was terrified of getting pregnant. So, you do your thing, and then I thought, oh, okay, now's the time, because we were getting old there. We were like 24, and like now, these days it's like, what? But, and then nothing happened, and nothing happened, and nothing happened, and nothing happened. And then we had all the tests, and there was no reasons for our infertility. So after 3 years, I was like 26 and a half or something. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I was going off for another check, a laparoscopy. And this is where it gets a little bit interesting. And looking back at it now, is that I went down for a massage because I was so stressed, because you know the stress of that not having a reason. And my sister-in-law had gotten pregnant, and she wasn't even trying to, that. And so it was really a tense time. And we went down for a massage, and the woman said, would you like some kinesiology? And I'm like, huh? She said, well, I'm sure we can tell. Yeah. And she said, I'm sure we can tell when you're going to get pregnant. I'm going, huh? I was very suspicious. Anyway, she took my arm and pushed down on it, and I pushed up, and she said, will Tracy be pregnant in, 2 weeks, 10 weeks? And it was like, no. I'm never going to get pregnant. I'm here for a massage, not stressful testing. And then it said in 3 months, and 3 months later I was pregnant. So it was that kind of little, it's funny to think that way back then there was these little inclinations of where I would need to go in my heart 30 years later. So fascinating. Anyway, so we did just randomly get pregnant. Perhaps not so random. We had the laparoscopy, and they say that sometimes in doing that it can trigger pregnancy. So we were lucky, and I did not expect to keep that child, because it was just like such a battle getting there. You're living on tenterhooks all the time. But we did, and so she is our firstborn. And my daughter. And then within a couple of years, we had our second born. So that was like, yeah, this is a piece of cake now. My body knows what it's doing. Not a problem. And although we initially wanted 1, but it was so hard to get 1, we thought we might have 4 after all. As you do, right? I remember on our honeymoon sitting on Lady Elliot Island going, let's have 1 child. I think we could handle that, And I was like, oh, no, we can't have any. Let's have 4. I was like, oh my gosh. So life just teaches you lessons if you're willing to learn along the way. The softening of us, the peeling off of our layers as we learn to walk an authentic path.
Mm.
Anyway, enough of that. So after our second one, I was pretty wrecked. Like, it was much harder than I thought it would be. I'd been finishing my PhD at the same time. I'd been trying to start my new business. I had ambitions of being, this incredibly successful management consultant. I was being paid truckloads of money in a day. I had a set of support that was unbelievable. I had my, the person who cared for the kids, for the person who cooked, the person who did the gardening. I had I had to get a chauffeur because I got so stressed I couldn't drive myself. So I was like this. It's just like, I'm rocking it, and it's like, and I want that third child, Just looking back on it, it's just like so funny. And then third child wouldn't come.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I really reflect on the 80s and 90s, women's beginning to like take that power that they could be corporate and just go, I can be super mom.
I can do it all. I can do it all. I have a line of professors in my family as well. So, we all these overachievers. And so I was on my path to overachieve, and my wheels fell off. So like cruising down the Gold Coast Highway without my wheels on, it was stressful. And that third child just wouldn't come, which was like beyond the control freak in me. I was like, why is that third child not coming? You look back on it and go like, I wonder why. But anyway, and I started having miscarriages, and that was really hard, really hard. And you think that you've got two children, why is a miscarriage hard? And they were early miscarriages, 7.5 weeks. But
you're pretty attached to the idea as soon as you're pregnant.
Before I was pregnant, excuse me, like I've been attached to the idea since I was 25 or something. I had my 4 kids lined up, so each one that arrived had already been in me for like 7 years, and then I lost them. It was like, where'd you go? Why are you falling out? I tell the little kids the dots have fallen out. And what was awful about all of that was also that my mother would be saying, and a lot of people would say things like, but why are you telling people you're pregnant? Like, it's so early. Like, why are you even getting attached? Why are you even doing pregnancy tests? Why don't you just sit and wait and keep it to yourself? Like, in some cultures, they don't even name the baby until the baby's 3 months old, and I'm like, this is not helping. For some people, really need to keep it to themselves. That's how they roll. Yeah. That was not me. I needed everyone to know, and I needed support from everyone, and I needed acknowledgement. But the problem, I think, is, and I don't know that this has changed a lot, that people are uncomfortable with grief and loss.
No.
They're uncomfortable with infertility.
No.
Yeah,
and I think, but I do find there's 2 different types of women, and how they process it. You will have those who keep it so tightly held to the chest. That was definitely me. I even had people reach out to me to go, so are you thinking about having a family? And I realized years later, that they were also going through struggles and probably reaching out for their support network. But I was so closed up.
Yeah.
I couldn't face anyone. It took me a few years, and I did finally get IVF buddies. And then, like women like yourself who really they appreciate their support network. They need that support network. And like, there's no bad or wrong. It's just such a personal choice as to what you need. But knowing that is really important, and like living by that and tapping into it as you needed it.
Yeah. And, there are people, the networks around you, like that made my mum, for example, very, very uncomfortable. Like, she was very uncomfortable that I would talk about my pregnancy and then my miscarriage. Like, why would you do that? But my husband was completely supportive. So, it depends who's in your environment and who's supporting you and who you choose to tell. And I'm not very good at choosing. I just tell, and that can be then costly for myself and for others. And I think probably that's something that I've wised up to over the years in terms of making judicious decisions that are then nurturing for me and for the others in my life.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? Like, we want it to be not taboo and not to be shameful, to be able to share our grief and our uncomfortable stories. But when the response from people when they're uncomfortable is impacting on you, then it's not helpful, is it? It's like this fine balance. And as you said, like being really judging who is going to be able to support you back. It's so important.
Having said that, I'm really glad I told along the way. I remember one Christmas having one of my miscarriages, and we were all squished into a family holiday house at Lake Baraba, and it was very cozy. And there was my mum and my dad and my brother and his wife and our 4 children. And there's Tracy having another miscarriage, and and really having the miscarriage, like in terms of the shock and the pain and the grief and the distress. And I could have gone home or holed up in the back room and not talk to anybody, but I showed up for it, and to some extent dragged people with me. But I honestly believe that for me, and perhaps for them, it was good. I remember my mother holding me and just saying, I wish I could take this from you, darling. I wish I could take this from you, take this pain and suffering. And I needed that. I needed to, even though she's like, why are you telling everybody, why are you suffering? It's only a dot. She was still actually witnessing my suffering and holding me through it. So often it is messy. Oh my gosh. Grief and loss and infertility, so messy. No clear one size fits all, no clear one answer. And I think for me, I work these things. I lean into the suffering. I don't, my life has been one in which I have come here to work through these things. And I know that my dad takes a pill. If you've got a problem, take something to fix it. And I'm like, no, I'm going to go through it and out the other end. And it's been tough, grueling at times. But I'm glad with the choices I've made. Like, I'm sure in different lifetimes I would take the pill, but in this lifetime, I'm here to go through these things, and I have the support and the networks and the space to do it. So that's been, some of those miscarriages were just hard. And I think in terms of where that's brought to me to now, like one of the other things that I did was with my miscarriages, I did things like I named the dots. I gave them their names. I talked to them. I had a ceremony to bury the dots that had fallen out, and gathered my 2 little children around, who I don't know, they're 3 and 5, 6 or something like that at the time, and we'd bury the dot. And I had these little rituals and ceremonies, and I told the kids we were pregnant, and I told the kids we'd had miscarriages, and I explained and talked and cried through it. And for me, that was really important, to make that a family experience and not to hide that from them. They're now 25 and 28, those first 2. I would be interested to know whether they remember it or feel resentful that perhaps I did that, but I think not. I think that as they go through their own life issues, they will know that this is not only them ever doing it. Nobody ever happened to like this before. Do you know what I mean? Like, they will have in their psyches that you can go through this, you can come through this, you can come out the other side. They've witnessed deep loss and suffering and pain, and they've seen me fall apart, and they've seen me come back together and keep going.
I wonder what, being so young, when you, as you have no critical factor, you absorb every experience as it happens. So I wonder what it has meant for them to have their own resilience and their own ability to be given permission to feel it all, express it all, in what was actually a really safe way of doing it. You did it through ritual, and you did it in such a loving way that was so inclusive, and really sends that message that this is okay to express yourself in this way. It's actually a really safe, beautiful way to express your grief and your loss.
That's right. So I think what's curious in hindsight, because I've been processing what I'm going to talk to you about today, is realizing that having had those experiences when I was working and like talking to the dots and that sort of thing, and actually having a sense of their spirit presence. So for me, there was a sense of a spirit being talking with me. Romany, my little gypsy bub, who flashed through me and went just kept going. There was moments of when I felt connected with her as a little spirit form and my spirit form, and then a passing through and a passing on. And that never came into my counseling work that I did. And I'm like, why not? Because I mean, how do you say to hi, Dr. Tracy Burgess Limerick here, and have you talked to the spirit of the soul of the child that went through? I don't think you don't go there. Like, it's just not going to happen. Maybe you might say, you might like to try a ceremony to release or something, but I'm not sure that I even did much of that. It's so fascinating. Those things that helped me, I kept in a separate place. And I don't now. The last couple of years, I've really shifted in terms of what I'm doing. But in order to shift there, I've ditched the psychologist. So I've actually released my registration of 30 plus years of being a psychology. I've released my membership of the Australian New Zealand Infertility Counsellors Association, because it's situated within the medical model where you can't talk about spirit, soul, ceremony, ritual, lighting a candle, asking the angel of children to look after that little dot as it passes through, all these different ways of thinking about and processing loss. Just don't sit nicely, comfortably. They don't resonate well in the medical setting.
Same, isn't it?
I know.
Compartmentalized, when it's the whole idea of spirit is connectivity. Well, not the whole idea.
Yeah, well, it's a huge part of it. Connection. Yes, we are one. There's a oneness. There's a connection. There's a relatedness. My PhD that I did before, when I was 27, 20, finished it when I was 27. Relational being. We are relational beings, and that relating, that connecting is deep and wide. And there's not, we can do this like listening, acknowledging, check and inquire will teach you the listening skills. You can do it with I don't know, there are so many. My brain is no longer in the psychology space, but there are so many, and there are all these little tactics that we teach people, practical skills that you can get Medicare rebates for. And I couldn't keep going with those once I had let go and immersed myself in a much more intuitive energy kind of space. And I think that for other people, other psychologists, I'm sure they can bring those things together authentically and beautifully. For me, I just needed to move on. It gave me permission to let my hair down. And looking back through my infertility journey, my miscarriages and my inability to get pregnant in the first place, and the lack of explanations, I can see now all those little threads of the ways in which that taught me and has informed who I am now becoming and what I now offer to other people, to other women and men, because the other part of this, of course, is my hubby, who was very stoic for the first 6 years, and particularly the 2 7.5-week miscarriages. They were the hardest on those first two. And then with the third one, I was like, another one, and I was much better at dealing with the third one. I'd done a lot of other work and processing and so on, and my husband's wheels completely fell off. I'm like, eh? So perhaps because I was handling it, he didn't have to.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't a screaming mess, it was all right. I don't know. But it is also, there are two of you going through this, and I think the men are often quite invisible. And I was so surprised, because it seemed to be water off a duck's back for him. You get pregnant and you lose and whatever. It's just like, there, dear, you should be right. But when he actually fell apart, I'm like, well, what? Why? And so, I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that our men are actually going through a really tough time as well, and socially they're not allowed to.
So what do you think, what was because I remember you mentioned it ended up being quite a high number of miscarriages that you had between your second and your third child?
I count them as 3. That's what I've decided. There was 10 years. There were 3 at 7.5 weeks, and there were other pregnancies. There were other times when I didn't keep track of whether it was going to be pregnant or not pregnant. It was just a delayed period that then didn't come to pass, which may just be me, or it may have been a really early miscarriage. I don't know.
In the IVF cycle, you know, because you're tracking it with a natural pregnancy.
And I mean, this is, even though it was sort of 25 to 15 years ago, so it's a different kind of space that those 10 miscarriages, well, who knows how many miscarriages, 3 that I have named and ceremonialized as such, and own as my story. So that was in that 10-year period before I eventually did become pregnant and hold on to my third child. So my little last one, who's now 15. So that's a different story, which probably is not so, that we don't need to speak into here. But it was 10 years was a long time, you know, and that was from when I was 30 to 40. And I wasn't even aware, as I am now, of what that means in terms of your declining fertility.
Yeah.
Like now I'd be going like, yeah. But, you know, the lessons in there were amazing. And they set me up from where I come to now. And, you know, when I work now with the medicine wheel, for example, I mean, really loving the medicine wheel. The energy of the East is the hummingbird or the buzzy bee. And that's the energy that takes each of the situations and goes, where's the nectar? Every situation it's a flower.
It's a positive you can harvest kind of thing. Yeah.
Every situation, you know, and you might not be able to see that what to harvest right up front whilst you're in your cave of grief and sorrow, or your fury and aggression and despair and hatred, like whatever's going through. But ultimately, the medicine wheel brings us back again and again to the rising sun, the new moment, the new beginning. Each day, each moment is a fresh moment in which there is a possibility of looking for nectar. And that has been, for me, one of those lessons that, yes, you go to pieces, I fall apart, and then I go, where's the nectar? Climbing back out again and looking for the nectar. And I think, looking back on that 10 years of miscarriages, there was lots of crises in which to look for the nectar, because in fact, when you're going through infertility, let alone the loss, each month is a loss. Each month I'm pregnant from the time I ovulate, and then I bleed, and there's like 2 weeks of hope over and over and over again. So whilst we could say there was 3 miscarriages, there was probably 11 times 10, 110 sets of grief to deal with along the way. Because I'm a positive person, so every month is like, this will be the month, you know. And the mental sparness of trying to work out how to soften up and make a space that will allow the baby in. You know, if I eat this, or if I drink that, or if I cut back my work, or if I, you know, what will make that difference? You know, if I've just got the wrong attitude. And over and over again, the wonderful people who give you advice that is so painful, you know, just let it go. I saw that eye roll. You know, so
the number of holidays I went on, let it go. And my period would come right in the middle of the holiday.
Boom, smack into the holiday.
Early too, like it'd just be like,
yeah. So there's all that you're processing as well. But at the end of that 10 years, we ended up going to Pittsburgh for 6 months for my husband's work. And I couldn't do any work there, so I was grounded because that was it. And in terms of where I'm going now, in terms of my love, I love using oracle cards and so on. At that point, I got my first oracle card deck, the Angel Oracle, for Christmas in Pittsburgh, because a friend had suggested that might be fun. So it was like a game to me. And I did like I'm almost over the fertility thing, but, you know, maybe. And I was like, tell me about my fertility, past, present, and future. So my past angel card was spiritual growth. And in that 10 years, I grew spiritually. As I stripped off layer upon layer of I want it now, and why can't I have it? And leaning into what I now think of as a hummingbird medicine. Just before we went to Pittsburgh, I'd started going, well, what's the meaning of life? Actually, I think
oh dear, it's frozen for the moment.
Into this, what I called intuitive energy therapy at the time. I didn't even know about Reiki or anything else. And now I see that as Reiki. But at the time I didn't know that. So I was just started doing this for about 6 to 8 months before we went to Pittsburgh. So that was a spiritual shift in me, that I could begin to sense energy and understanding of what is the world that we live in. What are we? You know, this being spirit beings in physical form, like that was beginning to come clearer to me. And I wouldn't have got there if I'd been raising my number 3 and number 4 children. I just would not have got there. It would have been way too.
And being the psychologist, like there's only so many compartments you can keep going at the same time.
The compartments are full, but there was a little space, and there were the lessons, the constant flaying that required some sort of response from me, so that is where I ended up being. Of an understanding that there was this difference. So when we were in Pittsburgh, that was where I'd been. The past card, the angel of the past, was this angel of spiritual birth, and I thought, tick. And the angel of the present was the health angel, and I had been quite sick in that 10 years. I'd had dermatitis. I'd ended up eating rice and tuna as my only things that I could eat. You could have rice porridge, rice drinks, rice, crackers. I was amazed, and then I was still sick. So stuff that. But the previous 12 months, I had actually just been eating a low GI diet, and I ditched all the other supplements and restrictions and everything else and just gone low GI. And I was actually beginning to feel better. So there had been a health shift in that 12 months.
Yeah.
And the angel of the future was the angel of young children.
Nice.
And then we had my third child. Within 2 weeks, my third child was there.
Beautiful.
So these oracle cards, I treated them for 10 years with some disrespect, in a sense, in that I kept thinking of them as a game, like a Rorschach. It's just like a blotch and you can just read into it, without actually appreciating that there are energies that are there that come through if you make space and you listen and you're looking. And thank you to the cards and the angels and the energies that they kept talking to me, even though I was, looking with one eye. But I've now opened both eyes, and I'm just like, wow, I'm loving all these different animal medicines and angel oracles and fairy oracles, like all the invisible realm, all the journeying that we now do. I don't know what we would have called it in the psychology space, but the shamanistic journeying. Like I have just had 2 years of going, oh, finally, I've just let myself be. And that miscarriage story has informed that. All of that infertility shaped and chiseled and stripped me down, burnt my layers until I was raw, and then could pupate my little larvae stage and spread my wings and actually find this kind of space that I'm so comfortable in.
Beautiful.
So that's, yeah.
Thank you. So can I tap into one of those other compartments where you've also been exposed to so many women's fertility stories as well by being a fertility counsellor in an IVF clinic for many years? I know that is in another compartment, but can we just crack the doors open a little bit on that and share, for women who are watching and they're going through or they've gone through their own experience and they haven't felt the call to tap into a support network in terms of, really going, did you feel this? Did you experience this? Were there some, I guess, common kind of experiences or challenges that these women brought to your counselling room that you think would be valuable to share with women and to help them kind of go, yeah, you're not alone?
Yeah. There are so many of those different strands to come from. One of the first ones that pops into my mind is if the woman has a partner, what that does to our relationships along the way. And I think it's not, the psychologists and the fertility counsellors know it, but it's not being supported well enough through the fertility space, because infertility and miscarriage, loss of dreams, loss of hope, that grief impacts so deeply on a relationship. Sometimes in that process, ultimately in the crucible, you get stronger in your relationship, but there's a lot that goes down first. And in that process, sometimes that relationship cracks. And seeking support in so many different ways, like whether it's just finding out that everyone else also is finding that difficult.
Mm.
So you're not alone in this. It's not like your relationship is stuffed. It should never have been in the first place. And probably the reason you can't have kids is because you weren't meant to. It's just like that's everybody goes through those thoughts. Let's process that. Let's let it go and come back to this moment. So there's that kind of sense of witnessing the impact of this fertility space on relationships.
Mm.
And they can be gay or heterosexual. It doesn't matter. The person who's going through the process of taking the embryos on, and then the other person who's witnessing and trying to be supportive and not allowed to have any emotions because they've got to support this one because she's the one who's got all the hormones going through. So I've just got to be strong, you know. And what we often see then is that this one who's getting the hormones and having the losses, more physical losses, thinks that this one is being quite standoffish and doesn't really get it. You know, the support person is just like, not what, how come they're not crying? It's obviously not as important to them. It's just like, so there's lots of these ways in which miscommunications and misunderstandings can then fester, and, you know, or this one who's being really strong thinks, you know, well, we shouldn't be keeping on going because the suffering is too great and I don't want to see my partner suffering like that, so we should stop, which is not what the partner was asking for. They were asking to be held. So the poor person who's trying to keep everything together, as opposed to the person who's just trying to get through the system of the fertility journey and the miscarriages, you know, the different pressures, different crises, and a really strong need at times to have a third person who just says, hey, this is normal. This is the kind of dynamic that often pops up, and this is what we can do to connect again, to build the bridges, to hold each other, especially if it's, no, let's just say it's often, regardless of male or female, that the person will try and fix the pain.
Yeah.
We have woeful understandings of suffering in our world. Where's the Panadol? You know, where's the epidural? Where's the something to get rid of the pain? We'll go see the psychologist, she'll get rid of the pain. We have no concept of getting stronger. So one of the first things that I bring to my sessions is how, as you suffer, you build your muscles, you build your capacity to hold it. And the person who's supporting that needs also to be developing the muscles to hold and not fix.
Yeah.
A lot of suffering is not fixable. It's chronic and you cannot get rid of it. And trying to get rid of it enters into the struggle where everyone is battling to get rid of the disappointment or the hurt or the embarrassment or the fatigue or the
comfort.
Just get rid of it. And that struggle of trying to get rid of it makes it 1,000 times worse. It's like the Buddhist arrow.
It's not validated then, is it?
No.
Like, it's not acknowledged. It's not.
Yeah,
you're not allowed.
No. This is like, I'm trying not to be a mess right now because, you know, because that's upsetting for my husband or my partner. I don't want them to see this mess because that's hard on them. So I'll just lock down over here and I'll just be really strong over here, you know, and we're just like, so how we make space for grieving and loss and messiness, and don't rationalize it and not, oh, she'd be right, the next cycle will be good, Dal, you know, let's just sit in this mess and witness each other. And as a world, like this whole last couple of years of COVID crises, this lesson is coming through so strongly, how to be with suffering, so that we're not in struggle and we can grow and we can move together and connect with deeper love and compassion and kindness. So I think that's one of the many different things that I see in common across different women who are going through the fertility and loss.
It's such an important one to raise. Thank you.
Another one would be like, it's my fault.
No, I remember going to that with that one.
You know, and I'm making this so hard for my partner, and they'd be better off with someone else if you've got a partner. And a lot of women don't. In the fertility environment, a lot of women doing it solo. But you know, there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with my body. Oh, that one where my body is just, and then you've got, let alone being alienated from your partner, if you're partnerless, or even as another sense of alienation and loss, you lose your self-love. You get into this battleground with yourself, like, why is my body not showing up here? Like, we were born to have babies. What is going on?
Yeah.
You know, and either they never happen, or they happen in a test tube and you put them in me and they fall out because I'm so useless I can't keep hold of them. Like the level of punitive self-talk as we struggle to own our part in this is really hard and very, very common. So working through that tension and falling in love with your body all over again. You know, this body who is trying to show up over and over, who keeps on taking needle after needle, bloating after bloating, and producing bulk eggs and then, you know, recovering from that, like depending on the process you've been through. This body of mine, who she just keeps showing up, you know, to love and nurture that. So that would be another element that, as part of the work that I've been doing, bringing that back into play, where instead of this medical sense of my body as something that needs to have the right amount of hormones and the right amount of nutrition, I want to shift into that space of, where is my love, my connection, my spirit connection to this.
Yeah, definitely.
That's two little spots of commonalities that will show, that often show up. What else? Another one is that after you've had a certain amount of, the way that fails. Oh my gosh, the way it's phrased, the fertility industry is just like, eh. When do you give up? You know, that's another really
big question.
It's so expensive to keep throwing money at these failures.
But
when
it's
do you
not
give
even only
up?
expensive financially, it's expensive
no.
emotionally, physically. Oh, yeah, I know.
And if you've already got children, you're not even connecting with the children you got, because you're too busy running around sticking needles in yourself and trying to have another one. Like, it's just, I'm not, oh, that sounded like I was saying you should be connected. I'm just saying that's what we're going through inside ourselves. You know, like, I'm not looking after my kids. I'm not. So that the costs are so huge.
It's part of that guilt that you're talking about. Like,
yeah. When do I give up? When do I spit the dummy? And that dynamic of give up, spit the dummy, quit, is such a barrier to knowing when my time here is done. I've learned what I needed to learn, and it's time for me to grow and go. It's a different, getting goosebumps.
It makes it more of a choice, doesn't it? Yeah. Definitely.
And it's a choice for something rather than a choice of a way.
That's right. Yeah.
You're choosing. Yeah, such a difference. So with acceptance and commitment therapy, to go back to some psychology roots, you have values that you are either walking towards or fears that you're running away from. So if we're quitting, sometimes we feel like we're actually quitting because we're letting go because we don't care about having kids anymore, as opposed to what I care about, what my true value here is, a life that is peaceful, loving and kind to me and all the people around me. My life to be peaceful, loving and kind to me and all those around me involves stepping into fully present in my children's life, or in my, if I don't already have children, in my life as a
woman,
technician, as a, you know, whatever it is I'm doing.
Yeah.
Whatever living that I'm doing, as a daughter, if it's relational, or as a friend, or, you know, as an adventurer in the world who just needs to see every aspect of the Queensland soil and really see it, and to go there and really, really connect with it in my days here on this, in this earth, in this place, in this body. Being able to step into those things is what you need in order to, with joy and integrity. There will be loss, there will be suffering when we step away from the fertility space, because you had a dream and the dream didn't come. And then what are the other dreams that then become possible? So it's changing that decision into from a fail into the other side of the same coin And the stories that we tell are just so important, because every morning you wake up either as someone who failed to have a kid or the kids you wanted or whatever, or someone who chose to live life in this way. Given the conditions, some of the conditions we just can't change in our lives. Like if you've not got sperm, you've not got sperm. That's not something one can change. I mean, I'm speaking very particular situation right there, one of the clients that I had. So then what do? You know, it's you then, what life do I want to create in this space with this? One of the other things that I found with, I could talk for hours with fertility is that, but after you've gone through enough fertility cycles or enough miscarriages or loss, I've lost the point. That's it. She's gone. Clearly wasn't meant to come.
She'll come back.
Yeah, maybe in the group interview next week. It's
yes.
wasn't meant to come out right now.
Yeah. I'm also wondering about that state of mind where, and it came up a couple of times when you're talking, you know, like the battle and the forging forward, like, to me, you know, and this idea of a fertility warrior, and you know, it's like constantly a fight. If you've got any comment on that.
Yeah, because it's that fight is a reactive kind of space, and it's a controlling space, and shifting into a space which is responsive and kind. There's the warrior as in soldier warrior, as opposed to warrior, the warrior who is strong and battlesome, and there's the warrior who is strong. And they're not the same thing. One is the control freak who's trying to destroy stuff, and the other is the person who's standing in their power, knowing what their gifts are and what their life is presenting them with, or what spaces are emerging for them, and walking in with strength, guts, confidence, courage, commitment, determination, but not with the fists closed. Like the fists closed leaves you so helpless. You're so gripped, you're so stuck. But when you've got your, you know, when the things, you know, that Karate Kid analogy where someone's attacking you, and instead of going blocking it and, you know, ending up with your broken fingers and smashed nose, you just step out of the way and you just watch it keep going. It's just like, yeah, there it goes, there it goes. That's power, that's warrior, that's strength. And having the wisdom and the groundedness, the feet on the ground and the clarity in your heart and soul to know how to step to one side and let that just flow through you. Because that, I mean, grief does. Grief flows through you unless you try and lock it up and deal with it.
Can I tap into that? So I'd like your thoughts on then what that means when people talk about, you know, it will always have a place in your life.
Oh yeah.
So just that difference between, I guess, you know, it as an emotion, it is in motion. But, you know, as you said, like you still remember each of those babies, and each of the women that I've spoken to, those babies were real. They grew them. They've lost them. They're part of their life. The honoring them will always be there. So that language around grief, honoring, accepting, you know, and moving the grief through, I get that, because, you know, anytime something's stuck, it's like it's not
even, you know, we make such tentative little steps towards processing our grief, and like, can I move it through? Oh great, it's behind me now. Good luck. There is a flow, and grief comes in waves, and then it, you know, and just like waves come and they smash and they go back into the ocean, and they will come again, and it might be a bigger wave and it might be a smaller wave. And when we try and stop the ocean, or when we try and make it go through and be gone with you, it doesn't work.
No.
Our capacity, our muscles are in allowing the flow of the grief, leaning into the space where it's allowed to be there. And I love it when we try and do that, and we're going like, right, so I've got grief now, I'll make a little, you know, emblem of an imprint and put it in the garden, and that will help process it. And there's still that same energy, I've got to process it and then it will be gone, as opposed to, ow, I need an emblem in the garden and now it's gone again, and I can move and it will come back when it does. But there's a different energy to trying to, we've got this sense of, it's been a year, are we still grieving? Like, and my mum, that whole 7.5 week miscarriages, she's making a big mess of it. It's been a year and she's still fretting over that one. Grief is so mysterious, and there's just a sense of living with it in its waves.
And I guess honoring the message that it's bringing as well.
That's my word, honoring. As you took the word right out of my mouth, and we're just like, poof, the angels popped it into the both of us at the same time. So, honoring our losses. I think that when we have lost someone, even the word lost is kind of indicative of misplaced somehow, as opposed to, I've connected with someone, they're no longer here in the physical realm. And you may not have to connect with them for the next 50 years. Like sometimes one of my miscarriages that I count as my 3 miscarriages amongst all the other losses, I don't remember her name. I know I named her and it may be in a diary somewhere, but I remember 2 out of the 3 names. So for me, there has been a processing where that has no longer been a connection that I still need, or that little spirit needs. There's been a processing onwards of that. And the other 2, I still connect with at times and process and be grateful for the lessons that we've had and the time that we've had. And I think when I've worked with over the last few years with people who've had late stage miscarriages or stillbirths, for example, or death just after birth, that there's been a lot of power in connecting with the spirit of the child. I mean, we know more now in terms of those late stage miscarriages and not miscarriages by the time they're later. We name them, and there's some ceremony, like the world has a few more just kind of parameters around that at the moment in terms of words and so on, acknowledgements. But for me, I found a huge amount of power in working with women to reclaiming that connection. So it's not like I lost them. It's like our connection has shifted. And what does that now mean? Well, how do we work with that? Do we have a little ceremonial space, an altar? Do we have a regular ritual that I go to and have a connection of some sort through that ritual? Like, that's something that's very personal and explored, but it's a radically different concept from the person is gone. I just don't believe that. And I found huge amount of power and joy in honoring that the person continues in some form, and embracing that space. Yeah,
beautiful. I really think we could keep talking for a few more hours here. So we will have to call it somewhere. And as you said, continue some of this conversation, because I think there's even a whole other conversation around trauma then that is experienced and held from a miscarriage or a stillbirth. But I think that it's its own conversation, and maybe we can explore some of that next week or even another time. But I really wanted to honor that some women are in that space as well. And so some of these things, some of these processes, for want of a better word, where we are talking about really allowing and acknowledging, may not come as easily or be as accessible. And for those women who are in that space, not to feel like you're a failure for not being able to express and feel and acknowledge your emotions in that same way. That we're all on somewhere on this scale, on this spectrum, and you know what you're able to do individually is right for you right now. And I talk about you know, if your distress levels are getting above a 5 or 6 out of 10, then that's time to reach out for external support. If your distress levels are in that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there is a lot of work that you can do yourself. And, you know, these tips and techniques that we're talking about here, such as the ritual and having a space for it and honoring those little beings that came in, is maybe a lot more accessible when you're in that level of distress where you can do that yourself.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, we might touch on that. What does it look like when you are, and what support can you access? And I'll have that conversation next Wednesday night at the event, which when we're airing this will be tomorrow night. My apologies, everyone. We have pre-recorded this.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So tomorrow night, Wednesday, the 27th of
good point.
PM.
Yeah. I think you're so right that it is very, very individual, and honoring where we are in our journey. You may not be ready for this view or that view or this tactic, skill, process, as we've said before, and that is absolutely fine. Like each of us grows at our levels. Like I have been through all those different stages of stripping down, and I'm thinking of one client in particular who went through years of dealing with her stillborn, and then this was where she finally found some solace. That doesn't mean those first few years she was doing the wrong thing.
No,
it's a process.
Yeah.
And we honor that as we process it.
Yeah.
Oh,
thank you for that.
All right.
Well, Tracy, thank you so much for sharing your personal story and some of, you know, opening that little compartment into the medical realm where you did, but I truly think that you would have always had that in you to honor them in your own spiritual way.
Absolutely. It was just like on the side. Whereas now that medical model, I have so many of those wisdoms still now in me, but they're not front and center. They're in the background, and I can dip into that basket when I need to. And there's a different foreground for me at the moment.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, I look forward to seeing you in the panel, in my women's circle, when we come together. It's going to be so amazing and powerful.
Lush.
Definitely. So I will see you then. Thank you. And if anyone has any questions for Tracy, please pop them in the comments below. I'll make sure that Tracy joins our Compassionate Women's Health community here in Facebook, so that, she's in our presence and in our space.
Love to.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you for creating the space, Belinda. You're amazing. The work that you do is so solid and so beautiful. Thank you for holding the space and nurturing it.
Yeah, thank you. It's my pleasure. I do find it's so needed. I know it is. So,
All right.
Thank you.